Alright, what's going on, guys? We've got another guide video here today. This time we're going to be doing the WZ-121, the Chinese medium tank, as requested by Mr. SoonerFan56. Sup, RNGesus, it is brothers. How's it going, brothers? Nice to see you. You mind if you do the WZ-121? Not at all. Let's get into it. So before we even get into anything, I just want to say this tank is not for everyone. This is a tank that you kind of have to get out of your comfort zone with, especially if you are a main medium player. If we take a look here, because it has a 122mm gun, it kind of suffers from, mediocre gun dispersion. And the big thing about this tank that makes it a little bit different from other medium tanks is that it only has 6 degrees of gun depression, which is a pretty common theme within Chinese tanks. Now, it is certainly not the fastest medium there is, but it is also not the slowest. It has a top speed of 56 going forwards, and going backwards it has a pretty decent speed of 20 kilometers an hour. It does not have some of the hull armor that other medium tanks have. As you can see, with most tanks this hull is going to be penetrable, but the main part that shines with this tank is going to be the turret. As a medium, you're going to be using your turret to your advantage as much as you can. Now, that does make it a little bit difficult since you don't have any gun depression like other medium tanks do, but you gotta make do with what you can. Now, this tank could certainly have better penetration. It only has 245mm of penetration with standard AP. With heat, it only has 290. The thing that shines about this tank that makes it different from a lot of other tanks, it has that 122mm cannon and a very short reload for its gun size, coming in at 7.33 seconds, giving it 3400 DPM. Now, looking at the tank from the penetration of another 121, the entire hull is going to be penetrable, but your turret is going to be where it shines, as does most medium tanks. The one issue on this tank that some other medium tanks do not have is that its cheeks are penetratable. With just standard AP rounds, not even running calibrated shells, right up near the gun mantlet, it is penetrable on the cheeks, as well as the two cupolas. Now, if you run calibrated shells, that area gets much bigger, making the cheeks a lot more vulnerable to damage, so you have to be careful when playing this tank, and the cupola's penetration spots also become a little bit bigger. Same story if they pull out heat, with heat shells not running calibrated. Same thing with the two cupolas. Running calibrated with heat makes it another story, as well as the cheeks penetration zone becomes even larger. So you can't really play this tank on the front line. Yes, you can, but I definitely do not recommend it. Now, that 7.33 second reload that I mentioned before does only apply if you're running gun rammer. So if you have calibrated shells, it is going to be an 8-second reload, which still has an amazing DPM. Now, when playing this tank, you have to think of it a little bit differently than your typical medium tank. You do not have that gun depression that most of them do, so you cannot do things like peek like this, so you kind of have to think a little bit outside of the box. When playing this tank, I recommend playing on a flatter surface where you have an elevated surface up in front of you, so you can peek just your turret without having to sacrifice the rest of your hull. Now, as we saw before, the cheeks aren't penetratable, so the further distance that you're playing, the better it's going to be for you, because the closer they are, the easier it is to hit those penetrating spots. Now, because this is a sort of low tank, it does make it a little bit difficult to do that sometimes, but being a medium, you do get this nice little speed, so you can travel around the map pretty quickly. Another thing that separates this tank from most other mediums is because this has a bigger cannon, it comes with worse gun dispersion than a typical medium cannon would have, which means sniping from a distance makes it a little bit more difficult. Now, this tank does have a very nice view range still, coming in at 293 meters with improved optics, which is going to be the same as the T62A over here. Unfortunately, not quite as good as the M60, but still pretty average for a medium. Now, if we come over here to Blitz Hanger, we'll see the things that this tank excels at. Frontline tank, it could be a frontline tank. You could use it like that. With that lack of gun depression, some people are not comfortable playing it as a medium and would rather frontline it like a heavy, as it does have that 122mm cannon. It's pretty average on hit and run, as would most medium tanks, where you'd sit in a bush, spot someone, shoot them, and then back off, and then you would repeat that process. Long range sniping is going to be average just because of that gun dispersion. It's not the most accurate tank in the world and can lead to some bounces or complete misses in some scenarios. Now it does rank good on Circle of Death. This is because obviously it is a medium. It is quite quick, so you can get around some heavies and some tank destroyers and keep circling them and keep using your DPM to kill them. And it says it is good for 1v1s. However, I wouldn't recommend using this in a 1v1, especially face hugging, because those two cupolas are going to be very easy to penetrate, as well as your hull, unless you're able to gun block. Now for me, in terms of consumables, I like to run my standard consumable setup, which is multi-purpose restoration pack, the repair kit, and adrenaline. Now this tank does come with tungsten rounds, so some people would prefer tungsten over something like adrenaline or repair kit. However, I like to keep these two handy just in case your ammo gets hit and you need to repair, and I just would personally prefer the adrenaline over the tungsten rounds. With provisions, like usual, you want to go with your plus 10% crew mastery. You want to get the protective kit, and then for your last one, I would recommend the improved fuel, as it does make you a little bit faster as compared to the tofu soup, where it just gives you minuscule improvements. In terms of equipment, I do recommend running calibrated shells. This tank does appear on the mid to low end / average end of penetration, so any extra penetration that you can get, you should take. Also running defense system like you should normally, as it gives you all these perks that you're going to want in a tank. You're going to want to run improved optics, as this does have a pretty average view range compared to most other tier 10 mediums. Enhanced gun lane drive, you want to get that minus 0.3 seconds to your aiming time. Now because this does have a 122mm, typically you would expect a tank with a 122mm cannon to have a kind of longer aiming time, but with this tank that is not the case. You can knock it down to 2.3 seconds with this. I recommend the improved assembly just to get those little extra hit points, as this does not do a whole lot with this tank, as it does not have a whole lot of armor to begin with. I recommend engine accelerator on this one because this tank already turns pretty quick as it is, so you want to get that little speed boost that you can, as well as the minimal hull turn improvement that this gives you as well. Now, like we said before, this does suffer from kind of meh gun dispersion, but with refined gun, you can knock that down to 0.288, which is great for a 122mm and also by Chinese standards. These last two are up to you what you want to do. I personally run toolbox and consumable delivery system, but these two are completely up to you on whichever one you want to choose. The last thing I'm going to recommend is loading up on premium shells with this tank. As we've discussed before, this does not have the best penetration in the world. Alright, we're going to go ahead and take this into public battle so you guys can see how this performs in your normal battle situation. As you're going to see, this is pretty much keeping up with this T-62A. That is because these are pretty much the same exact tank. Your best friend in this tank is going to be wiggling your turret if you see someone aiming, especially if you are only peeking your turret. That will make your cupolas a little bit harder to hit. Okay, our teammate's just gonna hit us. Awesome. Oh, see, this lack of gun depression does make it a little bit difficult at times. It does not get a depression boost when looking over the side, so sometimes it will lead you to miss shots like that. Now with this lack of gun depression, sometimes that means you're not going to be able to go with the other mediums. So what I would recommend is try to take advantage of the people that are by themselves. So on this map, because we do not have the gun depression, we are going to try to avoid going up to the castle, but instead maybe catching people that are on their way up to the castle. Now you can't always be great. There's going to be scenarios where your team is going to be holding you back stat-wise, and this is one of those scenarios where unfortunately you're not going to be getting the best team in the world. This is also another one of those situations where unfortunately one team is just better than the other, and you unfortunately can only do so much. Now this is a map that this tank performs kind of weirdly on, as the medium side on this map is entirely dependent on gun depression. Now when you're in scenarios like that where you can somewhat angle your hull, that makes it so much better with helping to bounce some shots. Unfortunately, I did not perform as well as I wish I would have, but this is another situation where one team is simply just better than the other. These are going to be my final thoughts on the tank. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 because it does support one of the best guns for a medium at tier 10. However, it is held back by its lack of gun depression. When you play a medium, you are going to want gun depression, and that shows tremendously when playing this tank. If you want to play this tank and you are a main medium player, you're going to have to learn to play outside of your comfort zone. You're not going to be able to play this like majority of mediums that I'm sure you have played in the past. Now, even though this does not have a whole lot of hull armor, it does bounce a good amount if you can angle your hull in the right direction. But if you can find a spot where you can constantly peek and hide, I would recommend that. Otherwise, this tank is not one that I would recommend just sitting in a spot where only your turret is showing, because if you're facing a tank with very good dispersion or very good penetration, it is going to either butter right through your tank or just going to be able to hit your cupolas every single time. So if you do not have this tank already, I would make sure you know what you're getting into. Otherwise, if you do have this tank and you're just looking to improve in it a little bit, I would say just play out of your comfort zone, because if you play this like a normal medium, it is not going to work out very well for you. That is going to do it in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to let me know if I missed anything, what tanks you want me to do next. I have plenty of requests from you guys from the last video, so make sure to leave even more requests for more tanks that you want to see. I love you guys. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Have a good night or day wherever it is for you. Mwah! I love you guys very much.